majors, minors, seventh chords. You can get a ton of mileage out of these, but what if I told you there's another easy way to add richness and depth to your chord progressions? That's right, we're talking ninth chords today. Although I'm pretty sure the thumbnail and title tipped you off. Ninth chords are a great way to add depth, sophistication, and vibe to your music. And at the end, I'll even send you over a backing track that you can download, you can drop straight into your DAW, and record your own chord progressions over. But first, let's talk about what a ninth chord is. Let's check out its variations and go over how to use them. All right, so what exactly is a ninth chord? Well, basically, it's just a seventh chord, but with one extra note, the ninth. So if you watched my last video on seventh chords, this is actually going to make a lot of sense. So if you haven't checked that one out, go ahead and do that right now. As per usual, let's start with the C major scale and find the ninth degree. So if you extend the scale past the octave, it actually repeats like this. So where's the ninth note? Well, as we can see here, it's the D note. It's just past the octave of C, our root note. And this is the note that gives a ninth chord its color and its feel. So when we add it to the seventh chord, we actually get a ninth chord. A quick trick to find this, whether you have it written out or on your fretboard, is to find the second degree. So what is the 2? Well, from C, the 1, the 2 is D. Now just go up an entire octave from that, and there's your ninth note. Now when you add chords that go past the octave, this is what they call upper chord extensions. So this is actually going into the territory of extended chords. Now there are quite a few ninth chords out there, and there's a lot of variations, but we're just going to give you a few just to get you started that are the most often used. And those ninth chords are the dominant ninth, the major ninth, the minor ninth, and the add 9 chords. Now these are going to be the most practical ninth chords you can start using now in your chord progressions in your music of any genre to make it sound more expressive and impactful. First, let's break down the dominant ninth chord. This one is bright, it's funky, it's full of movement. It's the go-to for blues, funk, and jazz. And if you recall our 7 chords video, the dominant refers to the 5th degree. So if a chord is referred to as a dominant chord, it's because it's built around the V or the 5 chord. So for example, in the key of C, that would be the G. G is the 5 chord. So we can easily make the G a dominant 7, for example. So a G7 would actually fit diatonically in the key of C, and the same applies for the G9 chord. It's a G dominant ninth. It's built around the V chord, fits diatonically in the key of C as a G9. So the formula for a dominant ninth is the root, the major third, the 5th, otherwise known as the perfect 5th, the minor 7th, and the major ninth. So this is what it looks like on guitar tab, fretboard diagram, and now we're going to hear what it sounds like. Now because that major ninth is actually stacked onto a dominant 7th chord, you might not think it would sound very different, but let's listen to the difference between a dominant 7th and a dominant ninth. So you hear that extra note adds a different flavor, a different color to the chord, but they do have things in common. Just as with the C dominant 7 chord, there's a pretty heavy pull and tension that is felt when you play this chord, and it lands really nicely when you play the 1 chord right after. And of course, as always, you can bend these rules and play dominant chords even if they're not diatonic to the major scale that you're playing. And really, as we've mentioned before in other videos, you're the composer, you get to decide where to use them. Now blues is a great example of placing a dominant 7th and dominant 9th chords non-diatonic of a major scale, placing them, for example, on the 1 and on the 4 along with the 5. So to hear dominant 9th chords in action, listen to the song Shine On You Crazy Diamond by Pink Floyd. Next up, let's talk the major 9th chord. This one is smooth, jazzy, uplifting. It's perfect for ballads and feel-good vibes. Major 9th chords are one of the most beautiful and open-sounding chords you can add to your progressions. They take the uplifting, stable nature of a major chord and give it an extra layer of richness by adding the 9th. Now the formula for that is the root, the major 3rd, the 5th, the major 7th, and the major 9th. Alright, now let's talk minor 9th chords. These chords are dark, soulful, and emotional. They're perfect for R&B, soul, and even moody rock. Now the formula for that is the root, the minor 3rd, the 5th, the minor 7th, and the major 9th. And this is what it sounds like. And finally, we have the add 9 chords. These are actually simpler because they skip the 7th and go straight to the 9th. And really, these are my favorite 9th chords to add to my chord progression. For example, the C add 9 chord is the root, the major 3rd, the 5th, and the 9th. This is what it looks like, and this is what it sounds like. Now, as you can hear, this chord is sweet, it's lush, and it's super effective. Perfect for modern pop and acoustic vibes, and I love them on acoustic guitar. Okay, so now that you know a few 9th chords, let's talk about how to use them to add flavor to your music. So as we mentioned before, dominant 9th chords are great in funk and blues, so try swapping out a couple of 7th chords or dominant 7th chords for a couple of dominant 9th chords. So instead of this, try something like this. So for something smooth and jazzy, use major 9th chords. So you can try something like this. So with this chord progression, you'll notice a dreamy and lush vibe. It's perfect for setting a mellow mood. So minor ninth chords are your best friend for soulful progressions. So you feel that? It's smooth, it's emotional, and it's full of character. Now add nine chords, again, are my favorite. They're great for giving your progressions a modern feel. So instead of a chord progression like this, and of course it sounds perfectly fine, but let's try something like this. And again, these are my go-to chords when I'm on my acoustic guitar looking for big open chords, or on electric guitar playing a clean tone with a little bit of dirt on it. Sounds really sweet. So just as we did with the seventh chords, how do we find ninth chords that are diatonic in any key? Well, let's break it down. So first we need to identify the scale. So we're gonna, again, use the same C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Okay, now we're gonna build the chords based on this. Now just as we did with the seventh chords, we're gonna actually pick a note that we want the root note to be of our chord, diatonic to the key of C, and then we pick every other note for a total of 5 notes. So C, E, G, B, D becomes C major 9, D, F, A, C, E becomes D minor 9, E, G, B, D, F becomes E minor 9, F, A, C, E, G becomes F major 9, G, B, D, F, A becomes G 9, A, C, E, G, B becomes A minor 9, and lastly B, D, F, A, C becomes B minor 7, flat 9. So in this case, because we're trying to stay diatonic, it's actually technically a half diminished ninth. All right, now here's where it gets fun. Now you're gonna use this knowledge and write your own chord progressions over a backing track. Your challenge is to take your knowledge that we've acquired over majors, minors, sevenths, and now ninths, and put it into action. For this video, I'm providing a backing track with just drums and bass guitar, and your goal is to create a chord progression using at least one ninth chord in every section. So I also included a PDF of the root tones of my bass guitar that you can use and build your chord progressions around. You can use these tones to start creating your majors, your minors, your sevenths, and your ninths, and try to keep them diatonic to the key that we're in. I think I made it in the key of C, I believe. So go ahead and download that backing track. In a separate folder, you're actually gonna see the piano track. Now don't touch that one until you've come up with your own chord progressions for the entire song. Now the piano track is really just an example of how I came up with a chord progression using ninths and sevenths and majors and minors. So one hint and tip that could help you create your chord progressions is first take note of the root note of the bass and either create a chord based around this for the chord that you're going to play. For example, if it's playing a D on the bass, we'll try and play a D minor 7 or a D minor 9, for example. Or build the chord around that. That's not necessarily a D chord, but just another chord that includes that D note in it, so the bass is now supporting the chord that you're playing. So once you've created your progression, record it over the backing track in your DAW, and as an added challenge, try playing your chords perfectly on time. So next we're actually going to look at sixth chords and how they can add more color to your music, and that's going to be right here. Right here.